Cubs have a lot of big-time prospects, and I know people are saying, hey, the Smokies are one of the most talented teams in minor league baseball, and they are, right? The Cubs DoubleA. But what about Iowa? They're one of them too, just to give you an idea of how deep the Cubs farm system is. We're going to talk to our friend Tommy Birch when we come back from the Des Moines Register about some of those Cubs prospects. He sees them and covers them on a daily basis. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. And when we come back, hey, we're going to talk some Cubs baseball. All right. Great to see Tommy Birch from the Des Moines Register, one of the OGs in covering minor league baseball, just because a lot of teams don't have a legitimate beat writer. So I take my hat off to you for that. And you cover it like a blanket. So it's great to talk to you today. Let's get into it right off the bat. Pete Crow-Armstrong, what are you seeing from the Cubs' top prospect?
Man, he might be the most intense player I've ever seen. You've seen it too, but like that dude will crash into one of the things I remember about last season, the Iowa Cubs were down late in the game. It was like seventh, eighth inning. They're down like 12-3, something like that. Ball goes deep in the gap. Pete Crow-Armstrong goes flying into the wall, crashing 100 miles an hour into the wall, try to catch this ball. And I'm like, man, that is one crazy dude. But that kind of epitomizes, the level of intensity that Pete plays with. Now, we all know what he can do with the glove. I think what's been really fun to watch is what he can do on the base pass.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of Javier Baez in the aspect that, like, somebody on Twitter coined this phrase for me that he is a chaos creator. And I think that's perfect when it
Yeah.
comes to PCA. Like, he turns nothing into something all the time. Now, obviously, the key thing with him is going to be what can he do with the bat. He's kind of had some ups and downs so far this season, but he's been a little dinged up too. He missed a game when he came out of a game with kind of I think it was an elbow deal. So um, we don't really know how much that's impacting him moving forward. But he had a really strong start to the season with the bat and was looking really good, putting together some really good at bats too. So he's been a lot of fun to watch. He's, like I said, the energy he brings is pretty unmatched. So, it's going to be really interesting to see and really fun to watch the development when it comes to the bat, because even last year we saw some of the talent that he's got with it, the pop, the ability to get on base, to draw walks. I think it's been really interesting watching him try to drop down some bunts and utilize that speed. Um, that could be a big part of his game as well. But man, for the last year and a half, he came up during the second half of last year and then has been here so far this year. He has been a blast to watch.
Yeah, like I saw him hit. I mean, I believe he can hit. And then I hear, okay, he's working with Dustin Kelly, in the offseason. They want him to change his swing. He didn't get a hit in the big leagues last year, which surprised me. Although I think that playing under Craig Counsell is going to be a lot easier for players transitioning from AAA to the big leagues, obviously than it was for those guys last year. But I've kind of been surprised that he hasn't really taken off with the bat. I think it's coming, but so far it just hasn't really happened this year.
Well, I would say like the first week and a half of the season, he played pretty well and then kind of got brought back down to earth a little bit. And I don't know if it has to do with that injury when he came out of the game, because then the next game he really struggled. I think went 0 for 5 with like 5 punch outs. So, there was probably some rust to shake off. But I think what's got to give Cubs fans some solace is knowing you look up and down throughout the system, especially when it came to last year, what he did in DoubleA and what he did in AAA. So far, there is a history that he can hit at times. Now, the question is going to be, what can he do at the big league level?
Right.
I'm definitely with you where I think, okay, the bat's eventually going to do something here at the AAA level. And realistically, like, what do you need out of a Pete Crow-Armstrong bat? Probably, realistically, not that much because of what he can do defensively, what he can give you on the base pass. Like, the bar for what you want out of that bat's got to be, not that high. And I think he can reach that bar. So I think it's probably just, like you said, maybe a matter of time before it kind of heats up.
Yeah, I think it's coming. I mean, he's only hitting like 200, 208 right now, but I'm a
He's
believer,
streaky
man.
too,
Yeah.
and I think, you saw that as much as anybody down there where, it's like, man, the hits come in so many bunches for Pete,
Mhm.
where he'll have a 3 for 4 game, a 4 for 5 game, a 2 for 3. When he gets hot, like, man, he is really tough to get out. And he does so much when he is doing that. It's not just the speed, it's not just the ability to drop down bunts. He can get you doubles. He's got some massive power too. And I think that's something that the Cubs are like, okay, we want to tap into that a little bit more too.
Right, right. Was he like 22 now? So I mean,
Hmm.
he's still he's still
Yeah,
a very young guy. But when the Cubs put Seiya Suzuki on the IL, it was Alexander Canario that they called up, which doesn't surprise me either. I mean, the guy had success at the major league level last year. And what has surprised me is that the Cubs have looked at so many other options besides the guys in their own system. But this time with Suzuki going out, they do look to Canario. What did you see with him so far this year?
yeah. I mean, what's insane is like Alexander Canario seems to be like the forgotten guy in the outfield. Where what was it, 2 years ago we were talking about all the potential that he has, and he
Yeah.
does have all that potential. Where um, he's got power, he's got speed, he's got a great arm. He can track down balls in the outfield really well, and it's easy to get lost in the shuffle um, when you're in an outfield that's including PCA and Owen Casey as well. So Alexander Canario, I think people tend to forget too. Look at during spring training. Um, what he was among the last guys that ended up being cut. And when
Right.
he came down here, back down to Iowa, he put together some really good games, some really good at bats. He was hitting doubles left and right. I think it was one of those cases that once the weather got a little bit warmer um, in Des Moines, some of those doubles probably end up turning to homers. But like I said, to me, it's just been absolutely wild how we tend to forget about Alexander Canario because of all these other guys in the outfield that the Cubs have and what are coming up through, the minor leagues too, where you're talking about some other big names as well. But, Alexander Canario is, we don't like to talk about five tools as much anymore. I think the game is so focused on like, okay, do you have like 2 or 3 really elite tools, especially as a hitter. We want that guy with the great eye. We want that guy with the great power. And he's got all that plus more. And I think um what tends to be lost in the cause too is that like, man, he can be a plus defender out there. And like the at bats are still really early in his career too because of the injury they suffered during winter ball, not last year but the year before. So it's like to a certain degree we're still just kind of scratching the surface of that potential, which like could be as good as anybody when it comes to like Cub outfield prospects.
Yeah. And he's got big shoes to fill too, because Seiya Suzuki has been one of the best players in Major League Baseball. I mean, I know we're only in, the first month of the season, but oblique strain, he's going to be out.
Sure.
Who knows how long that's going to be. So they're going to need Canario to really step up and be the guy that we saw last year that had 6 runs batted in one game. But when you talk about, outfield prospects, Pete Crow-Armstrong, Owen Casey, and even Brandon Davis
Yeah.
probably will be back in Iowa sometime soon. Although I think that he's been passed by, these other guys, and then Canario now in the major leagues. A guy that you see every day that's in Iowa that I'm curious about is BJ Murray. He was so important to the
Sure.
Smokies last year. I think he was the MVP of the playoffs and championship series. He had a 3-run homer to get the Smokies, basically uh, to a championship for the first time in 45 years. Great guy. You don't hear a lot about him, but
Sure.
he's a prospect. How's he been this year? Where's he playing?
Yeah, he's playing throughout the infield, but one other thing I want to go back to when it comes to Canario too, that I totally forgot about. Like, man, that to me was like one of the biggest question marks when it came to him, being in Iowa, going up to Chicago and sitting on the bench for so long, where you're kind
Yeah.
of wondering, this is a dude that's missed so much time. Um, what is your ultimate plan for his development? Bringing him up to Chicago and having him sit on the bench when um, this is a guy that's missed valuable at bats. So, I thought it was interesting what you had said about Craig Counsell. Um, definitely being a guy that's probably going to be a little bit more patient when it comes to some of these young guys. And you look back at Alexander Canario, where if he was up last year, Craig Counsell was the manager. It's like I remember last year when Canario belted that grand slam. I jokingly said, like, if Alexander Canario is not careful, if he keeps hitting this way, he's going to have to come off the bench the next night. And sure as heck, he did.
Yeah.
And I think that's really tough when you're asking young players who are going up to the big leagues. One of the reasons why you're going up to the big leagues is you are playing really well in AAA, and you want to continue that um, kind of wave of momentum that they're playing with in AAA up to the big league level too. So, that's why I'm really interested to see what Canario does now that he inevitably is going to go up. Now that he's up, he's probably going to play every day.
Yeah.
Now, back to what you were saying about BJ Murray, he had a really tough start to the AAA season, but um, man, he's got some elite speed. He's got some really good defensive ability. And you really saw that speed the other night when he belted, his first home run in AAA ended up being an inside the Parker. But, he seems like a really good dude, loved in the clubhouse, works his butt off. Is that type of guy that you want in a clubhouse for a championship culture, like what Tennessee had this last year. And I think that's something that he brings to the table. Now, it's just going to be interesting to see, um, in the grand scheme of things, like where does he end up fitting? Like, man, it's kind of like these outfielders too. It's like you mentioned Brennan Davis. At some point, Brennan Davis is going to be back in Des Moines. He's working his way up through his rehab
Right.
assignment. Before Alexander Canario went up, you're talking about PCA, you're talking about David Peralta, and you're talking about Owen Casey all getting priority at bats. The Cubs haven't fully given up on Brennan Davis. Um, so it's like, okay, how do you manage those at bats? And I think it's kind of the same situation with infield where you look at BJ Murray, you've got Chase Strump, who isn't quote unquote a prospect anymore,
Right.
but
Right.
somebody that the Cubs have invested a significant amount of time and hope and energy in
Yeah.
that they still want to see um, kind of take that next level. And then they've got Luis Vasquez, who's a very high priority
Yeah.
right now. So that's going to be really interesting to see kind of where he fits into things there because like man, you look up in Chicago, like if you think it's hard to get into Iowa's lineup, like as an infielder, like it's 10 times harder up in Chicago right now.
Yeah. No doubt. Well, let's talk about a guy that's been in that lineup in Chicago who has been putting on a show in Iowa on rehab. And I wonder like where the spot's going to be. But Patrick
Yeah.
Wisdom with a couple of tape measure home runs, 9 runs batted in. He's played 7 games. It feels like there's really no rush to get him back because I don't think there's a spot for him right now. Is
Sure.
that the vibe that you get? And what do you think happens to Patrick Wisdom long term? How's he been down there?
He's been absolutely great. He is absolutely raked. Even his first game here, where he didn't have any hits, like you look at the exit velos, every ball was hit hard. He's
Yeah.
worked great at bats, even when he's not getting up, even when he is not getting a hit. He's working counts full. He's getting on base. He's been playing first base. He's DH. The other night he was playing third base for the first time, which kind of I think tells you um, a little bit about the situation there where they are totally all in Christopher Morel right now, where the fact that we're going a long time into the rehab assignment and we aren't seeing much of
Right.
Patrick Wisdom at third base, kind of a kind of a telltale sign when it comes to that. But I think right now we're at a point when it comes to Patrick Wisdom and the whole rehab assignment where like I think they're gonna let it ride out for now, where it's like, okay, until an injury happens, until the Cubs have to make a move, they're just gonna let him play every day in AAA right now. Now, the impressive thing is, we have seen so many guys that have come down here on rehab assignments and they've struggled. Now, the biggest name that I think every Cubs fan is still haunted by is Ian Stewart, where you look at what he did, what was it, like 8, 9 years ago,
Yeah.
comes down on rehab assignment, just absolutely struggles. Meanwhile, Chicago's got Luis Valbuena. Um, I
I
can't
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, he is just absolutely struggling
It
in
was terrible.
AAA. And the Cubs are like, okay, we don't need to rush him back. We're getting production at third base right now. And I think that's kind of the situation too when it comes to Wisdom, where like, okay, they're getting some really good production from Morel. Obviously, the defense is a continued work in progress, but I think the way they kind of look at it is like, okay, there's more um maybe upside and more intrigued when it comes to Christopher Morel. Where at this point, you look at Patrick Wisdom. If you don't know what you have with Patrick Wisdom by now, you haven't been fully evaluating him. I think at this point, he's been in the big leagues long enough that they know what they have. And
Right.
I think the intrigue of Christopher Morel, and, it's kind of like, I always make the comparison that it's kind of like let's make a deal. It's like, Patrick Wisdom is like, okay, we're gonna offer you the new car. Patrick Wisdom is the new car, or you can have what's behind door number two. It could be absolutely nothing. It could be a piece of paper, or it could be a jet boat, and you're like, oh my god. And I think that's part of what they're looking at when it comes to Christopher Morel is like, okay, man, it could be something absolutely amazing with him. We know what we have with Wisdom. Let's just write it out. And usually, um, I think these things have a way of like naturally working themselves out where, it's like inevitably somebody is going to get hurt, somebody is really
Right.
going to struggle, something is going to force their hand. And, right now, if they do end up needing, another infielder or just another bat, like Patrick Wisdom has certainly put himself in a very strong position and say, like, look, don't forget about me. Like, I'm still a dude that can hit some home runs in the big leagues.
Right. So do you think um is he on Iowa's team or is he on a rehab?
He's on a rehab assignment, but I think right now he is just on the team, but he's also rehabbing.
Yeah,
It's like
right.
right now they've still got that window where they can call it a rehab assignment. They don't have to place him on the roster. They don't have to make a move, but inevitably the rehab assignment's going to end. I think can't remember what it is for position players. It's like 30 days or 25 days, something like that. I
Right.
definitely got to look it up, but at some point, um, the rehab assignment is going to come to an end and they're going to have to do something with Patrick Wisdom, either, call him up, option him. I'm not sure if he's got options, but or trade him, something. But,
Yeah, right. Right.
it's
Well,
like
you'd
I
have to
said,
do something with Cooper because it's like him and Cooper are kind of the same guy. Cooper's better
sure,
defensively. Wisdom it will kill left-handed pitching,
sure.
So yeah, I
And he's
saw him
definitely
like
got value too.
oh yeah.
It's like how much do the Cubs value it? Is somebody out there going to value it more too? And I think right now it's like, man, it's a really good problem to have, and he's really forcing the issue more by coming down here and absolutely raking right now, as opposed to like what I said, where it's like you have this situation like Ian Stewart where he just comes down here, he doesn't do anything, he pouts, he plays horribly, he kills his stock. Nobody is interested in him. You can't do anything with him. At least now you've got a situation where you could potentially do a couple of things when it comes to a guy like Patrick Wisdom.
Couple other areas that the Cubs are always looking for help, and this team's no different, is pitching. Thomas Pannone off to a tremendous start this year, and 2-0 record and a .57 ERA.
It's
I
been
think
insane.
Cam Sanders, if he could just throw a little bit more strikes, but he's got good stuff. Carl Edwards Jr., CJ Edwards is down there. Who are the guys that you feel like, and Hayden Wisniewski's name comes up a lot. I mean, he almost made the team out of
Sure.
spring training, but who are the guys that stand out to you that could help the Cubs sometime soon?
Yeah, and I think Pannone is obviously the front runner where, it's like you look at his numbers and you're like, holy crap, like this is a journeyman that's been around the game for a while. He's bounced around from the United States to um I think Japan, KBO, stuff like that. So he's got a track record of proving they can get hitters out at elite high levels. So I think he's like a good um kind of insurance policy type of guy where it's like, okay, if we need a guy that can spot start, we need a guy that can come up as like the 26 man, or, it's like we need somebody in long relief. That's your type of guy. Another guy that like I've been really fascinated with, um, and the numbers like don't really jump out is Sam McWilliams, another guy that
Yeah.
has like been bouncing around the minors for like 10 years. He's never gotten to the majors. But he's throwing 98. He's got wipeout slider. He's got some really good secondary pitches. And one scout that I talked to was like, "Man, I've seen this guy pitch in the past.
Oh, they
He
love him.
did what's up?
The scouts love him. I mean,
Oh yeah, they absolutely love
yeah,
him."
they
And
always
there's like
have.
yeah, but this scout was like, "Man, I've seen him pitch before, but I've not seen this type of stuff out of
Wow.
him." And I think what's impressive about a guy like McWilliams is, um, obviously he can give you one inning, but they really like the idea that he's a guy that can go two, three, 4 innings. So he can give you a multitude of different things. I think obviously the most interesting name is probably Carl Edwards Jr., just because he's been with the Cubs, in the past, he's bounced around baseball. His fastball isn't what it used to be. There's still some rust that kind of needs to be shaken off. His first couple outings have been hit and miss. So,
Hmm.
I think if the Cubs had to make a move like right now, I don't think Carl Edwards Jr. is going to be the guy. I think he, maybe three or four on the quote unquote depth chart that probably does not exist, or the depth chart that I will never see the light of day of. But
Right, right.
yeah, but then Cam's been absolutely, he's a fascinating guy too, where you look at the raw stuff, like the stuff is there. Um People in the organization will rave about what he can do, how much the fastball has improved once he kind of moved to that relief role. But like you said, the biggest thing for him is going to be command. Is he going to um be able to consistently pound the strike zone? If he can, like, man, that guy is a legit 7, 8, 9 type
Yeah,
inning type of dude. But that's the biggest question. Can he throw strikes? The other name um, that I think people have tend to kind of forget about is lefty Brad Wick, who is throwing the ball
that's right.
really, really well. The problem is his velo, I don't think, is where the Cubs have wanted it to be, and it probably shouldn't be where they want it to be right now because it's the guy that had Tommy John. He had the heartbeat issue. He hasn't pitched in baseball for a long, long time. So um, there's going to inevitably be rust to shake off. The important thing is, even when the velo hasn't been there, like he's getting out. So I think that's got to be pretty promising to know that okay, the velocity is eventually going to come back. It just takes time. But in the meantime, like um I think you're thinking like, okay, if he's doing this without it, once he gets it, like he can be even better. So there's some legit options down here in AAA. Riley Martin has been pretty sharp at
I
times.
like Riley Martin. Yeah.
Yeah, Porter Hodge came up and was thrown in the high 90s the other day. So, I mean, that's a name. I pretty much have rattled off the entire pitching staff at this
Yeah.
point.
Well,
But
one guy we didn't talk about was Cole Franklin, but we both
yeah,
saw the video of him getting hurt. I think he blew out, and I hate that because I feel like he was someone that the Cubs would legitimately look at as an option at some point this year if he kept on the path that he was
Sure.
heading down.
Oh yeah, and his first AAA start, he only got, I think, 2 innings into, and he's really excited to get up here, show what he can do, and obviously there was going to be a path to the big leagues. We're still waiting to hear. The Cubs had told me they're going to do further testing, but like you said, when you watch the video, you're like, man, you've been watching baseball long enough.
Yeah,
You've
you
seen that
know.
song and dance where it's not good.
I
And
hope I'm
just
wrong.
me too, yeah. I mean, and you look at the opportunity that was kind of presenting itself to him, where he was going to be a guy that was probably going to make his big league debut at some point this season, just with how things were trending, if he could have proved himself in AAA. So now we kind of wait on that. One other arm I totally forgot about that you're very familiar with, and I think a lot of Cubs fans have totally forgotten, is Ben Leeper.
Yeah,
Um,
and you know what? I saw you put that out the other day. Leaper was on a leap to get to the big leagues really fast, and then he was hurt. And when I saw that you put that out, that was one of the reasons I was like, man, I got to talk to just to find out what's going on, because he would be someone that could really help this staff if he's back and healthy.
I'm totally convinced if he had not gotten hurt 2 years ago, he would have been in the big leagues. I think it
Oh,
was
yeah.
like a really like he was 1 or 2 outings away from going to the big leagues. It was that close. Like, get ready, your time is really coming. And now the thing for him is going to be okay. Um, you're coming back from another major arm injury. Where's the velo going to be? It's going to take some time for that to come back. But
Right.
like, man, if there's anybody that we know can battle back from an arm injury, it's Ben Leaper, because he's done it for so many times. Now you hope that it can get rewarded, for everything he has been through. Because I mean, man, that dude has been through hell and back.
Yeah. So is he pitching and you see him, and what do you see when he's out there?
So I haven't seen him yet, but I talked to him the other day. He actually got onto the mound for the first time. He's now doing bullpen progressions. I believe he's still out in Arizona. The hope is he's going
Okay.
to get back to affiliate baseball. I think sometime in July, June or July, sometime around that timetable. And I think the game plan is he'll kind of do like a rehab type stint where he kind of works his way up through the minor leagues and eventually gets to Iowa, which, like, man, right then you were putting yourself right back on the radar, because no matter when you get back to Iowa, there's always going to be that relief pitcher need in Chicago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, and that's why your roster or the Iowa Cubs roster is so important to keep an eye on, because in a second, someone could be called up and given an opportunity. One of those positions that Iowa is definitely holding, to me, that's really important to the big league team, is catcher, because I don't feel like the Cubs organization has depth in catching, and that if something happened to Yan Gomes, there would be a huge drop off. And there was a time that Iowa had like 4 catchers, right?
Yep.
Now it's Ali Sanchez and Kurt Casale that they signed, and then Bryce Wyndham, who is the young guy. But Wyndham, he's batting 190 right now. I know it's only a couple weeks in, and he's not a veteran with a bunch of experience. They traded Joe Hudson, but they still have Sanchez and Casale. Both guys can hit. Both guys have played in the major leagues. How weird has that been? Just where you turn around and there's like, like 4 catchers.
Yeah, I mean, at one point there actually was, when Joe Hudson
Yeah,
was still here. And I think it's kind of gotten to a point where I think, if something happened with Jan Gomes or Miguel Amaya, I think Kurt Casale's probably going to be the guy that ends up going up, just because he's got that big league time and he's
right.
got so much experience. But the thing is, when it comes to Bryce Wyndham, like, dude, that dude is an amazing athlete. You're talking about like a state champion basketball player. I think he was a star football player in high school. Um, a really good baseball player in college. And even though he's listed as a catcher, I don't know if that's actually what he's going to be. They've already used him in the infield. I know they're going to use him in the outfield too.
Huh.
they're doing whatever they
Like
can
PJ
to,
Higgins kind of.
yeah, to a certain degree, which is kind of crazy because PJ Higgins is the guy who taught Bryce Wyndham how to catch in the first place.
Really?
That was kind of his mentor. So, I would say the difference is when it comes to Bryce Wyndham, I think there's more um, versatility when it comes to what he can do defensively. We're not talking about like, obviously when you talk about catcher like moving to the field, always think like, okay, he can play first base, maybe he can play left field, but like Wyndham is a guy that can play second base. He could probably play third base. He can play both corner outfields spots if needed. So he's a guy that he was hurt for a lot last year. I think given more at bats, he's going to produce more than obviously what he has right now. But the fact that they are going out of their way um, to find ways to get him on the field shows that they think something of him and they want to tap into it more and see more of it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we'll find out. I mean, it's, going out and signing those guys that have a bunch of big league experience, definitely, tells you that the Cubs are very aware that they don't feel very comfortable as far as that depth goes. Now, kind of finishing our conversation, let's talk about some of the guys who, well, you mentioned Luis Vasquez. He is hitting again, which people didn't think he was going to be able to do. He's got the Gold Glove
Sure.
defense, and he's eventually going to be an excellent major leaguer. He's on the 40 man. I don't think that there's anyone that's really worried about Vasquez should the Cubs need him going up there. But two guys that have done really well for Iowa, Jake Slaughter and Matt Mvis. I don't know what Slaughter needs to do to be taken seriously, but the guy just continues to just play baseball. And I think he should be taken seriously. And then Mvis
Sure.
owns AAA, but now with Michael Busch at the big leagues, and doing what he's doing, you wonder what his future looks like.
It's funny you mentioned Jake Slaughter. I'm sure you've come across this guy, Gary Ross, on Twitter. He might be the world's biggest Jake Slaughter fan. And what's crazy is like Slaughter has kind of been like a fringe prospect type of guy. So I totally love um that this guy's gone all in on Jake Slaughter because
He's bought his
he's not
stock.
he's not the like prize prospect, but man, like he's a really good baseball player.
Yeah.
He's got power, he's got versatility, he can swipe bags. Like I really don't know what more you really want out of a guy like Jake Slaughter. But the problem is now you look around the infield and you talk about once again kind of like that situation that I brought up when it comes to the outfield. You look around the infield, BJ Murray, Chase Trump, Luis Vasquez, and now Patrick Wisdom. Those are
Yeah.
guys that are all getting priority at bats. So, now you're looking at Jake Slaughter starting, a couple of times a week and probably pinch hitting some. But every opportunity that guy has gotten. He has made the most of it. You look at it, it seems like every night in the box score, it's like 2 for 4, 3 for 4.
Yeah,
You
right.
know,
Like he just hits. I
yeah,
think that it's that he doesn't blow up the analytics, right? Like his swing doesn't look like, Will Clark's. I mean,
yeah.
it's his swing, but he makes
Well,
contact and he hits for power, and he's had to learn how to play baseball as an athlete, not
sure.
as one of these guys that did the travel teams all the time. Was a great football player, but
Yeah.
I see this guy and I'm like, man, every time I watch him, he's always a little bit better than the time I saw him before, and that he could help a team win. I feel like.
Well, it's kind of like going back to what we had talked about when it came to PCA. Like, it's like PCA has got two like very great trends that are two special skill sets that
Right.
like really jump off the map. He's got the speed and he's got the defense. Like there is not one thing that Jake Slaughter does that like blows everybody away. He's not like amazing power. He's not like amazing contact. He's
Right.
not like amazing defender or amazing speed. He's just really solid all across the board. And
Yeah.
I think now, especially in today's game, unless you have that like one trait that like really, sets you apart, it's
Mhm.
so easy to get overlooked. And I think that's happened to be the case with a guy like Jake Slaughter. Now, the other guy you mentioned, Matt Mervis,
Well,
like,
let me ask you this before you get into Mervis. Where's
sure.
Slaughter playing right now?
So
Third
he's played
base?
a lot of third base. He's played some first base. He's played some second base. So I think he's played
Kind of
everywhere in the
utility?
infield but
Okay.
shortstop.
I get
So,
that.
like, man, like, once again, like, you talk about what you want
Mhm.
in a guy like that. He's giving you versatility. He's playing all those spots really well. Power, speed,
Mhm.
great dude, too, but loved in the clubhouse.
Yeah,
So,
great guy. I like him a lot.
like there's nothing, even though there's nothing that like absolutely jumps out when it comes to Jake Slaughter, there's nothing that stands out that when you watch his game you're like, man, that's going to be a big problem if he gets to the big leagues.
Right, right.
That's going to be a big issue. I think just a good baseball player.
And then Mervis.
Yeah. What's insane too is, it's like Matt Mervis, it's funny, I talked to him about this before the year. And like last year, he was the dude. He was the guy that everybody was talking about when it came to minor league prospects. Like PCA was still kind of coming
Mhm.
around. Owen Casey was still kind of coming around. Matt Mervis had just absolutely tore apart posing pitching in 2022. And everybody was like, okay, this is the dude. This is going to be the prodigal son. This is going to be the first baseman. Um, that we've been missing out on since Anthony Rizzo got traded. Now,
Yeah.
like, man, he put together great numbers in AAA. I thought it was like an absolutely horrendous situation he got thrown into when he got called up to the big leagues. One, the Cubs offense was just absolutely scuffling at the time. The Cubs won't say it, and David Ross didn't say it last year, but they were absolutely looking for him to fix everything that was going wrong with offense at the time. They were looking like, man, this guy is going to be our magic bullet. He's going to fix everything. But then he realistically did not get put in a really good spot to um, succeed. He's another one of those guys that he ended up going up. He gets in the lineup. He sits 2 days, gets back in the lineup. It's like when you send a guy up, like throw him into the deep end. Let's figure out. And
Right.
some of the analytics were telling you that like Mervis was figuring it out at the big league level, where his barrel rate was getting better, his exit velos were getting better. But then he gets sent down at right when things are starting to turn around.
Mhm.
Realistically, the numbers really weren't that bad in what he produced last year when it came to his time in AAA. Um, but I think so many people look at that small window in his time in the big leagues and think, okay, he can't hit in the major leagues. Now, obviously, I think the verdict still is not out on that because Matt Mervis has not gotten significant playing time when it comes to what he can do at the big league level. But he is absolutely showing that he can hit AAA pitching. Now, like you had said, the Cubs have um, seemingly figured out what they're going to do at first base. But
Right.
if something happens, Matt Mervis certainly put himself in a really good position to get another look. But like, man, it was really puzzling when you look at the end of last year. And so many people in Chicago were saying it too. Like, yeah, Matt Mervis struggled during that time in Chicago, but he'll be back at the end of the year. And the call never came.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, okay, what I think Matt Mervis is kind of a product of, one, bad timing, and two, even though, um, I think anybody that went undrafted in 2020, you kind of take with a grain of
Mhm.
salt because it was so short. But he is also not a guy that, like, he wasn't a prospect before that breakout season. It took that breakout season for him to get on the radar and to kind of earn that spot, so to speak, where I almost get the feeling like nobody has really invested serious time into Matt Mervis. And that, those struggles in Chicago last season were enough for them to say, like, see, That's why he wasn't a prospect. That's
Right.
why we are giving him a shot. But I really would love to see what Matt Mervis could do at that next level, because it is such a small window that he's gotten up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the reasons that Rossi isn't the manager anymore, too.
Absolutely.
His thing wasn't transitioning guys to the big leagues, and the Cubs. I just was puzzled by the Hosmer and Mancini signings anyway. I
Sure.
mean, like, why not just do what the Cubs did this time around with Michael Busch, where they're like, hey, he's going to be our guy, and look at what's happened. The guy, he struggled in the big leagues
Sure.
to the same tone as Mvis last year, but he got the opportunity, didn't have to worry about trying to impress anyone. Go out there and do your thing. And, I think Mvis has the ability to be really good in the big leagues too. We'll find out. I don't know if it's going to be with the Cubs or not, but it's really a shame to see a guy that has succeeded so much in the minor leagues and then get a little sample size in the major leagues. And then, everybody just be like, okay, well, he can't do it.
There were two guys that going into this season I thought would absolutely benefit the most from, Craig Counsell coming on as the new manager and replacing David Ross, Matt Mervis, and then Caleb Killian. Caleb Killian was constantly going up to Chicago, and um, the continual thought process was, you go out and pitch, you give us 4 or 5
Right.
good innings, or you're going right back down to AAA. And I thought that was like a really tough spot for Caleb Killian not to only be put in, but then you had that time where he pitched in Miami and absolutely
Right.
struggled. And David Ross had come out and said, like, look, I do not want to see Caleb Killian until he is ready. It's like, man, some of these young guys, you're not going to know what you have till they get up there, they struggle. The transition is not always going to be smooth, and it rarely is. But the good big league players find out how to um, work through those. And I feel like when it came to Caleb Killian and when it came to Matt Mervis, they never really got that shot
Mm.
to work through them.
Right. Or Pete Crow-Armstrong. I mean, even when he was up
Sure.
there, like
Yeah.
I really like David Ross. I have a lot of respect for him. And I was also glad that the Cubs got rid of him. I mean, just because the one of the advantages that the Cubs have is that they traded away all of their great players to get young players back. And Tommy, you've been in this game a long time. How long have you been covering the Iowa Cubs and baseball?
Covering baseball, 20 close to 20 years, but the
Okay.
ICUPs, I think 15 years on and
We're in the
off.
same boat. I mean,
Yeah.
I know you. I've known you for a long time, so I'm with you. But I don't remember the jump being as high as it is right now from
Sure.
Iowa to the major leagues. And I've said that the reason why is that we push guys up so fast, the leagues are watered down, and then all of a sudden you get to the major leagues and it's a big jump. I used to feel like the biggest jump used to be going from A ball to DoubleA. Then you get to DoubleA and then you get to TripleA, and then you get to the big leagues and you were pretty tested by then. Now I feel
Sure.
like, I mean, look around the league. I mean, it took Jackson Holiday a while to
Sure.
get a hit. It's not easy. It never was easy, but I feel like now it's the toughest it's ever been to go from one, from you guys from Iowa, the team you cover, to the major leagues.
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, you would talk to people around baseball, and you talk to scouts, players, officials, whatever, and they would always say the biggest jump is Double A and Triple A, because in Double A, when we're talking about kind of evaluating hitters, when it came to pitchers, you had so many guys that were figuring out how to pitch. The story I always tell, um, when it came to Javier Baez, and when he first got called up to AAA, he's absolutely raked against some of the best pitching prospects in baseball. But when it came to some of the veterans that came down, and I'm
Right.
just throwing out like a random name like Kyle Loesch, some of those type of guys that came down, they just absolutely owned him because they knew how to pitch. You don't have that in Double A now. I feel like you don't have that as much in Triple A either, too,
Right.
where now you aren't being fully tested. It seems like night in night out. You're constantly facing, prospects that are throwing 98, 99, 100, and you're facing it so much more because so many guys, specifically when it comes to pitching, are being asked to do less. Now you're getting guys that are throwing 4 or 5 innings, and that's it. They go straight to the bullpen. You're gonna see a collection of arms for the sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth innings. Um, so yeah, now you can hide so many young guys in AAA now, and the path is just so much faster too.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right when it comes to that, and I think one of the big problems too. It's like, man, I go back to Caleb Killian, and I look at kind of how he was managed, where he's on a really tight pitch count when it comes to what he's doing in AAA.
That's a
He's
whole
throwing
nother
like
show.
yeah, he's throwing like
Oh, and then you
65.
get to the big leagues and they're like, hey, let's go out and throw 6 innings right now.
Yeah,
It's like, well, I've
and
never done that before.
and anybody will tell you your first big league outing, if you throw 70 pitches, that's like the equivalent of throwing 100.
Right.
So it's like you're automatically tacking on something that you haven't asked them to do in AAA to now what you're asking them to do in the big leagues too. So yeah, I mean, look, the simplicity to it when it comes to managing prospects is you just got to have patience.
That's
And,
right.
in hindsight, do we look back on it like, um, was David Ross not patient, or did David Ross maybe know, like, maybe I'm managing for my job here to a certain degree? Obviously, he didn't know that Craig Counsell was going to become available. But I think that's something too that we have to figure out about David Ross as a manager too. But I would say,
Well, he didn't
like,
think that he was there to develop,
no,
and
absolutely.
Craig Counsell was with Milwaukee where they had to develop, right? And
Sure.
he
And
thinks,
that's why
hey,
it's a
look, I got
perfect
to
fit.
do that, and it's like, you want these guys to get there a lot faster than they used to. So part of the development is going to be like Christopher Morel is a great example. Like he's learning how to play the game at the big league level, but he wasn't around a whole lot in DoubleA. He wasn't around in AAA a whole lot, So that learning curve is, him being in the major leagues, unless you go out and get guys like Matt Shaw, who's kind of a savant. I bet you he's probably played in a million travel team games. And then,
Sure.
he goes to college and he's great there. And then he's in DoubleA. He's great there. He'll be great in AAA. But it's not like he's learning all this from the organization. He's
Sure.
coming in with that already in his toolbox.
Well, then the question too is, if David Ross was managing this Chicago Cubs team, would we be seeing what we're seeing out of Michael Bush? Like, how would it have played out? Like, would he have gotten the long leash that he's gotten to be able to get to this point to prove that he can hit at this level, and he can be an everyday player, and he can be an impact player? That's probably the biggest question when it comes to that. Now, if you think no, then it's like, man, why is Matt Mvis now in AAA? Now you've gotten to a point where you just don't have a spot for him. But what do you do with a guy like Matt Mvis? And I know that there are teams out there that are certainly um, still very intrigued by Matt Mvis and what he can do with the bat. Where I'm fully convinced he can be a guy that would go up to the big leagues and be able to hit reasonably well.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out. I think you're right too. What are you working on, and where can people read your stuff?
Yeah, so I got a really cool story coming out on Brad Wick right now, kind of looking back on everything he's been through. I'm sitting here waiting on Matt Shaw watch, to see when he eventually gets up here. But got some other cool stuff coming up, but you can check it all out at DesMoinesRegister.com. I'm on Twitter at Tommy Birch, and all that cool stuff. I've got Instagram, I've got Snapchat, I've got Facebook, um, I've got everything. I'm everywhere,
Everywhere. And I
Mick.
hate to say it, we're the OGs in this business now
Isn't
somehow.
that crazy?
I know. I know. It's crazy to me. Well, let's do it again soon.
Anytime, man.
Awesome. Great conversation with Tommy Birch. And you guys, again, check him out. Des Moines Register and all those places he just told you. Make sure you like and subscribe. Get in the comments section and tell me what you think. You tell Tommy what you think as well. And we'll have the debate in there. But fantastic show today. And we will talk to you guys again real soon.